Welcome back to another edition of Down to the Wire, where I bring on my Pagcast NHL analyst, Nolan Thode, and we just recap the weekly headlines throughout the NHL. And let's start with the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. Columbus and Winnipeg have agreed to trade. So Columbus trades Pierre-Luc Dubois and a third-round pick for in 2022. I should mention for Patrick Laine and Jack Roslovic. The first issue with this trade that I should mention is that, we have to go through the whole quarantine thing because of the whole coronavirus. And, I think that we'll see in the coming weeks how this trade will affect both teams, whether it's not having them in the lineup right away or whether it's, when we see them in the lineup. So I'd like to get your take on it, Nolan, before we continue.
I think it's a super interesting trade. It's not often where you see two young players really get swapped. I know there's Roslovic and the third-round pick as well in this trade, but it pretty much is Laine for Dubois when you get down to it. I think I really like this trade for Winnipeg. Some people are saying they're giving up a lot, giving up Laine and giving up Roslovic. Those are two, Roslovic was a first-round pick himself, and Dubois, went, only one pick behind Laine, but Laine was, labeled as this generational goal scorer, whereas Pierre-Luc Dubois is just more like a solid, steady centerman. But like I was saying, I really like this trade for Winnipeg. Last year, when I was doing my predictions for the play-in rounds, I was looking at Winnipeg's roster, and they have a lot of talent in their top six in terms of forwards. With Kyle Connor, Blake Wheeler, Ehlers, and Scheifele. But what they really are lacking on that team, on offense at least, is a lot of center depth. Last year, they had Scheifele, who's a sound first-line center. But, other than that, they had Cody Eakin last year in the playoffs. Obviously, they addressed it somewhat. They traded for Paul Stastny, which I like that fit as well. But, having now Mark Scheifele and Pierre-Luc Dubois, if you can sign him long-term after his bridge deal, I think that's just a great 1-2 punch down the line on center. And it's really going to be a tough competition for the opposing team. I think, if Dubois continues his trajectory in terms of his development, that can be one of the best 1-2 punches in the league. Not saying it's going to be up there with Draisaitl and McDavid, but it's definitely going to be solid. As for Columbus, I think they're getting good pieces back, but I'm not sure how well they fit within their roster. Roslovic, I actually am quite excited to see play because he's from Columbus. And a big issue with, Blue Jackets in their history is, no one wants to play in Columbus. But, he's from that area, so he could, bring some passion into the lineup and be a good piece for them. But, I'm really interested to see how the Laine and Tortorella fit really works.
Yes, because Columbus is a team that's built on defense. That's what Tortorella really stresses most. And that's why people, criticize Laine a lot, is because, and the advanced analytics show for you nerds out there, is that he's not good defensively, and it's pretty evident as well when you just watch him. And it is going to be interesting to see what that fit will be like for Torts and Laine, whether they will mesh together or not. And could we see Laine potentially move again? That would be insane.
I think absolutely. I believe Laine is not going to spend the rest of his rest of his career in Columbus, whether that be leaving in free agency or getting traded once again. I think really, in terms of team fit, Laine doesn't really do much for this current Blue Jackets team. As you said, he's not really great defensively. The analytics, the advanced stats, they'll show you that. He's a great goal scorer, but Columbus doesn't really have that. Sort of they try to win games 2-1 rather than score a bunch of goals. So I think really what they were going for in this trade is to bring in a big name talent like Patrick Laine, who probably has a little bit more trade value than Pierre-Luc Dubois, especially with Pierre-Luc Dubois sort of forcing his way out of Columbus.
I agree as well. And, this trade wasn't, just happening out of the blue. As I was reading the analysis on this trade was stemming from the draft in Kevin Cheveldayoff's words. And it's, good to see that they finally managed to get this deal done. Obviously, as a GM, you want to get a disgruntled player out as soon as possible because it's a stressor and you kind of don't want to deal with it throughout this crazy season as well, with it being a sprint. And I just find it weird how this whole trade includes 3 players that are disgruntled. There's not one player that was happy with their current team.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. And I think a fresh start is all that these players need. I think, maybe not so much for Roslovic, just because he's a little bit on the lower end in terms of talent compared to Laine and Dubois. Not to say that he's not a good player, but, I think that's really what Dubois and Laine needed, is somewhat of a change of scenery. Just the way things were going in their current situations, they weren't really doing too much. But I am surprised with Dubois, because last year against Toronto, he looked so great in the play-in, So I am surprised. It seemed like it was pretty quiet through the offseason. We didn't hear about it too much, but as soon as the season started, we heard all these reports of how unhappy Dubois was with his team.
Well, another team that's pretty unhappy is the Washington Capitals and their whole COVID situation. There are 4 Russians, Kuznetsov, Ovi, Dmitry Orlov, and Ilya Samsonov, who are out for 4 games. It's been around 2 games now, I'm pretty sure, so they'll be out for the next 2. But I think Washington has played phenomenal considering the lineup they have. They're without one of their best defensemen and 2 of their top 6 forwards. And Ilya Samsonov, who's, the starter over Vitek Vanacek, or Vanacek, my bad. Anyway, I think that, Washington has played really well considering the roster they are given.
Mm-hmm. And Ovi, he's missed a game every season because he's sitting out of the All-Star game. But for the most part, the Capitals are used to having Ovechkin in the lineup. So, for Laviolette, he comes into Washington. Within his first 2 weeks of coaching, he has to completely change up his, game plan. And I think it really does prove the depth of this Washington roster. And it proves, why they won the Cup in 2018. It's a really well-sound, well-built roster. And I think they're doing well in the absence. But they'll be happy to have those 4 players who, by no means are non-contributors. I think all of those players, Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, those are both some of their top forwards. Their starting goalie and Samsonov, and Orlov is a top 4 defenseman for them. So missing a lot of big pieces, and to see that they haven't really, gone down too much is really, a credit to Pierre Laviolette and what he's been doing with that Capitals team.
I think that 4 games is actually the right amount. It sends the message across. And I think if there were, too few, you might get more complaints. And if there were too many, you might get just as many complaints. And so I think 4 is a good middle even number to hand out.
Yeah, I think the suspension amount was decent. I'm not too sure if it had anything to do with specific protocols or quarantining or anything. And as NHL fans, we were prepared for things like this to happen in the season in terms of, protocols being broken and such. But it's so early in the season, and especially with a guy like Ovechkin, he's a Russian, so, maybe a little bit unpredictable in the North American sort of style. But, he's the captain of that team. So you're definitely surprised to see the protocols broken that early.
Another team that got, completely shellacked by COVID was the Carolina Hurricanes, and that caused a huge schedule change. 7 games in total had to be rescheduled. I'm pretty sure there are around 5 or 6 teams that got their schedule impacted. And like you mentioned, being a hockey fan, as hockey fans, we had to be prepared for this, given the fact that, they weren't going to be going into a hard bubble. I think that, we just had to be expected this.
Mm-hmm. I think it's frustrating as hockey fans, especially to see these sort of things happening, because we take pride in the sport that we like, and you see the NFL season. They're about to reach the Super Bowl. They're about to have a full season, no cancellations, but they had a rough patch where games were being suspended and moved and things like that. And NBA had an outbreak recently, and it's still sort of going on. Games are being postponed left and right. And I thought, as a hockey fan, that the players in our league were going to be responsible enough to follow these protocols, and we weren't going to have as many issues. Because I remember saying to my buddy to bring back the Winnipeg Jets, Mark Scheifele, I feel like Mark Scheifele, there's no way that guy's going to break the rules. He's going to go home and he's going to do everything he can to play hockey the next day. So it is frustrating to see these teams, so early in the season too, being irresponsible and not only impacting their own schedule, but the schedules of other teams as well.
Something to note is that so far, two American teams have been, completely destroyed by COVID, and yet there's no Canadian teams. And as we know, the Canadian teams are just playing against each other. That's something to pay attention to, because that's just how bad this virus has gone between the States and the Canadians.
Yeah, no, I think it really does show the difference between the state of the pandemic in both countries. Obviously Canada, you and I, we're Zoom calling for this. We're not face to face. We're not going into school or anything. So not to say that the pandemic is not much of an issue in Canada, but with the States, I feel like it just is such an issue, and I believe that the teams in Canada are being responsible thus far, and we haven't heard any peeps of anything happening, and I hope it continues.
Speaking of this whole coronavirus pandemic, per Darren Dreger, he got information saying the Canadian teams asked the federal government to reduce the quarantine from 14 days to 7 days and produce 4 negative tests, which I think is good. This is in relation to the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade and how that's cross-border. However, I would have liked to see this issue get hashed out before the season. That way teams could have better prepared themselves for something to happen like a trade. And I'm honestly surprised to see a cross-border trade. I didn't expect one to happen.
Yeah, it happened so early. I think NHL fans, we were looking to maybe the trade deadline as a potential day with all these issues, and we didn't expect all these or any cross-border trades to happen so soon. And it really does have an impact. They're going from one country to another, and the quarantine as of now, I believe nothing's happened. It's still 14 days, and 14 days in a season like this where you're playing almost every other night, even 2 nights in a row, 14 days is a lot. And I think, the Oilers took advantage of that last night. They beat the Winnipeg Jets. Who knows if they beat them with Pierre-Luc Dubois in their lineup. I think, the Jets and the Blue Jackets both are missing a key piece to their top 6 for 14 days, and they're going to have to adjust.
I should mention that I'm not too sure about the Columbus schedule, but I know for Winnipeg that Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to miss around up to 7 games. So, that's 14 points right there. And that's massive, man, considering, this North Division is a 4-point swing every night. I don't know about the Columbus schedule, but I know for Winnipeg that Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to miss up to 7 games. And, that's up to 14 points. And, I just didn't know just all these small little parts of the puzzle can impact the team on such a large scale.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like I said, missing these key contributors to your offense, it really impacts your team. And I feel like the 14-day period, they're traveling to a different country, so 14 days, is fair. But I do think with what they propose to the government is fair as well. 7 days, you're still quarantining, you're still preventing yourself from being exposed to the viruses. And then if you're getting 4 negative tests, I feel like your odds are pretty good. But it's such an unpredictable thing that, adjustments are being made day by day.
The Dallas Stars finally opened up their season against Nashville. They scored a touchdown and the extra point, 7-0, as Anton Khudobin posted a shutout against the Predators, like I mentioned. Do you think we could have expected this? I think we could have, since they had so much time off.
I mean, yeah, they had time off and they had more time to prepare, you could say, but they also had, so many issues with their team, everyone getting into Dallas, for the, shortened training camp. But I think, they did a good job with the hand that they were dealt. And I think, maybe we're seeing a bit of, they played all the way to the Stanley Cup final. So they have more, experience in these games than other teams do. They're missing Tyler Seguin, who's a big piece of their offense. But I'm quite shocked that they did put up 7 in their first game. It's an incredible feat. And what I learned from Dallas last postseason, I always thought Dallas to be just a sound defensive team, wasn't going to score too much, but was going to find a way to win the game. But last year in the postseason, they had multiple games. They had to go up against Colorado in a series, so the goals had to come. And I think Dallas for the first time, especially on the power play, is seeing a lot of success on offense.
You mentioned the power play. Well, I'll run down a quick statistic here is that they scored 5 of their 7 goals on the power play, and one came shorthanded, and one was even strength. So you could argue that Nashville did a good job defending them 5-on-5, and it was just a really undisciplined game by Nashville to give the Dallas Stars so many power play opportunities.
Yeah, they had 5 in the game where they won 7-0, and then they beat them 3-2 the other night. Those 3 goals were all power play goals. So, it begs the question, is this Dallas power play, are we expecting, 8 power play goals through 2 games? Is this going to be one of the top ones in the league? Or is just Nashville's penalty kill something that they need to figure out?
Jamie Benn, we saw that he got injured against that season debut against Nashville. It's interesting because, like you mentioned, the Stars are without Sagan, so maybe Ben will be out long term as well. Who knows? And if he is, that will impact the Stars on a large scale.
Yeah, no, I think he's a big piece of the offense as well. But I think also you might be seeing this in the NHL more so. In the NBA, you're used to seeing, quote unquote load management has really been an issue. Players have been resting games, but Jamie Benn, he's more of a veteran player in the league. He's more prone to injury, and playing all these games, playing back to backs. You could see maybe these veteran players taking a step back and sitting a game just because their body can't handle it. And even with the training camp, Jamie Benn in the first game of the season gets roughed up a bit. So you hope that these injuries don't have too much of an impact because, in addition to COVID, there's just so much going on to a roster. You want to see them be as healthy as they can.
One team that got out of the winless column was the Chicago Blackhawks as they beat the Detroit Red Wings 4-1 for their first W of the season. I find this funny because really, if we look at that Central Division with Chicago being in there, I find that Detroit is really the only team that they can beat.
Yeah, last week we talked about, Chicago through, I think, their first 3 games of the season. They weren't looking very good whatsoever, and they had a lot of defensive issues. Malcolm Subban and Colin Delia both got their starts and didn't do too well in them. And now they have, I'm not too sure his first name, but his last name, Lankinen. He's in net for the Chicago Blackhawks. And a note that I put down is, is this their new starter? Is Lankinen the real deal? Or is it just the fact that they're playing the Red Wings? I think if they're looking for any success, they're going to have to capitalize against the Red Wings, one of the weaker teams in this division.
I think, as because like you mentioned, Lankinen, Colin Delia, and Malcolm Subban are your 3 goalies. You just got to ride the hot hand. And right now, Lankinen's pretty hot. So I think you just got to ride him until he burns out because, Chicago won't be having much success this season. And, I mentioned this last week, they're probably going to secure a top pick in this draft. I think you just got to ride with the hot hand if you're the team management picking the starting goalie.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about Lankinen's age, but if he's young, if he's able to get some good game experience this season, even if it's an unsuccessful one, long term, that could be something good for him. Chicago's defense, we were on them last week and saying how they were bad, and not to say that they were great or anything, but they did stop Bobby Ryan from scoring against them. And for hockey fans all around, I think Bobby Ryan's hot start to the season was just a nice thing to see after all he's been through. I was truly shocked, when he was bought out by the Senators. I thought they were just going to ride out the rest of his contract, but he ends up in Detroit, and hopefully he can.
I have also been liking the play of Kailer Yamamoto, another great player that's had a good start. Some notes I have about him are, he's fast, he's agile, he's tenacious on the puck. The shift never really ends for him. He's just a bundle of energy, and it never seems like he's striding around on the ice. He's always working in the corners, winning those puck battles. The kid really goes hard every shift. And I, as well as Oiler fans, must agree that, they must be happy with Kailer Yamamoto's development so far.
Yeah, he was drafted in 2017, and in that season, he actually made the roster out of camp. A lot of fans were excited, but he eventually got, sent back down to the WHL just because, he maybe had the heart and what we're seeing, he plays this, all around game where he's just going 100% the whole game. And that's why he made the team. He had a strong camp that year, but his game just wasn't fully matured. And then his second season, he didn't play much either. But then last season, around mid-season, he was called up and he was close to a point per game, given he was playing with Draisaitl. But, the two of them have showed, a real good connection. And as an Oilers fan, I couldn't be more happy. McDavid and Draisaitl, they were always playing with each other for the most part, 5-on-5. But now the fact that, Draisaitl has, Yamamoto, someone that he can have chemistry with on the second line, really spreads out our offense. And, I'm super happy about the play of Yamamoto so far.
And I think Dave Tippett made a good decision to move up Jesse Puljujärvi up to the first line alongside of Nugent and McJesus. Not only does that give us a better idea of what Puljujärvi's development is going to be, but I think it also gives his teammate Puljujärvi a better chance to succeed.
Yeah, Puljujärvi, him and Yamamoto both, they were our top prospects in 16, 17, these pieces to the offense that we thought were going to come in and contribute. But Puljujärvi, he didn't have the greatest relationship with Todd McClellan, our former coach, and he wound up playing bottom 6 minutes. And because of that, he wanted to leave. He went to Finland, had a good season, and then, reports in the spring this year, I believe, were saying that he wanted to come back and be a part of the Oilers organization. And I think a big part of that was because he believed he was good enough to play a top 6 role. And, when the opportunity to play with McDavid is there, that's why he wanted to come back. And what I loved from Puljujärvi early this season was he was on the third line with Kyle Turris. So he wasn't getting those minutes early on with McDavid, but that didn't really stop him from, trying to just play his best game. When he was his first stint with the Oilers, he seemed, unmotivated after he was moved away from McDavid. But, in this situation, he worked hard and now has gotten himself in that top line role. And, him, Nugent Hopkins, and McDavid looked great last night, and I hope for good things to come from them.
Another team that I kind of ripped on defensively, we mentioned the Blackhawks. I ripped on the Maple Leafs defensively last week. And I just want to say that, Toronto has played a much better defensively sound game. They're cleaning up the D zone. And, I feel like in recent games, they're playing more as a team, right? They're supporting each other in the D zone as they're breaking out rather than individually. I'm not sure if you've been seeing the same thing.
No, yeah. I mean, the Oilers played the Leafs twice last week, so I was able to see it firsthand. But, they really looked a little more solid than I'm used to seeing the Leafs. And, they had a tough, hard-fought game against the Jets that they won. It was 3-1 with an empty netter, but that's a close game. You're not used to seeing the Leafs win these 2-1 games. It's either they're going to score a bunch of goals and win that way, or, there's no way they can win. Last night, they beat Calgary 3-2. So I think it's big and shows a lot of maturity from this Leafs team to be able to win these close, hard-fought games without having to pile on the goals. And I think the whole team is, buying into a second-year Sheldon Keefe system of maybe having defense on their mind first.
Dylan Cousins made his NHL rookie debut a couple of days ago. He's on the taxi squad right now, I'm pretty sure, with an absolute rocket of a shot. He was coasting down the right wing boards and he sniped it top blocker. I thought he went glove side first, but I had to watch a second replay of it. I thought it was an absolute rocket of a shot. And, the workhorse from Whitehorse, coined by Bob McKenzie himself, I thought, it was a great shot and shows just the potential of this kid.
Yeah, usually half of the first career NHL goals are really nice goals, and half of them are, just in front of the net. They squeak it in and they get on the board. But Dylan Cousins, coming in and scoring, a goal like that to be your first goal really shows that, he is worth that top 10 pick that the Sabres spent on him a few years ago. And, we've seen him in the World Juniors and he's looked great there. And we're hoping that it can translate well to the NHL level. For sure. I think Cousins, for Sabres fans, they got to be excited about the talent that they have there.
I'm hoping that he keeps this momentum going. It's just unfortunate that, he was sent down to the taxi squad the day after he scored his goal. So the timing is a bit weird about that announcement, but hopefully that doesn't ruin his confidence too much.
Yeah, no, I think, with him, there's a lot of young pieces in that Buffalo organization that are trying to crack the lineup. Him and Middlestat both are sort of on the bubble in terms of making the lineup or not. So it is it's more competitive than you would think a Buffalo Sabres roster would be to make. Just these young players. I think Ralph Kruger, their head coach, he has a little bit more confidence in some veteran players. But if Cousins keeps scoring like that, we can get really used to seeing him on the highlight reel.
Another young team that we should be looking out for or watching is the Ottawa Senators, and they really showed their young strides, I think. Speaking on the Derek Stepan's no young player, but he came in as a veteran presence. But they couldn't have they. What am I trying to say? Like Derek Stepan, his penalty costed their game against Winnipeg on Saturday. And, I think this season will be really up and down for Sens fans because they are going through the growing pains of being a rebuilding team. And I think that's part of, showing your young strides.
No, yeah, and I agree completely. I think the Senators team, early on in the season, they beat the Leafs in their first game. A lot of people were excited of what this Senators team, had to offer. But now, that we're 2 weeks into the season, we're seeing, this is still a very young Senators team, and they're going to have a lot to learn. Even though it was Derek Stepan, one of their veteran players, they're going to have games like that where a stupid penalty costs them or whatnot. So, I think just this year for them especially is having these young pieces in positions to succeed and just growing. I think, playoffs might be a little unrealistic for them, especially in that, highly contested North Division where only 4 teams are going to make it. But I think the Senators, they're exciting, but there is a lot of room for growth for them.
Like you mentioned, speaking on the North Division playoffs, the 3 teams that I have outside of making the playoffs this week, I have Vancouver, Ottawa, and Edmonton outside of the playoffs. But really anything can happen because this North Division is a 4-point swing, like I've been talking about. So, what I say now is probably not going to be true a week later. That's just how crazy this division is.
Yeah, I think, if I'm a betting man, I wouldn't put any money on the Senators, to make the playoffs just because I feel like, even though they have solid pieces, I just think, as a roster, as a whole, they're too young. And I think they are a little bit worse than the other 6 teams in the division. But, with only 4 teams making it, those 2 outside of the playoffs, other than the Senators, I think, from first place to 6th place in this division, it could be really tight. And, with these teams at any given night, who can win? I don't agree so much on the Edmonton pick, maybe a little bit of bias, but I think they can turn things around and get into the playoffs. They're still sort of finding their stride. They had a disappointing qualifying round, but I hope they can get back to, playing the hockey that they did last season. But Vancouver, they're outside of your playoffs. And I completely agree with that. They had an exciting run last year, eventually losing to the Golden Knights, and people were excited for the future of Vancouver, but they have not looked, to be that team so far.
And I think that also attributes to Elias Pettersson's slow start. He only has 2 points through the team's first 6 games. I could be wrong about that. But, he hasn't been as electrifying as we're used to seeing. He hasn't been off to the same start that we're used to seeing. And, he came in his rookie year. He won the Calder Memorial Trophy for Best Rookie of the Year. And he just hasn't been back up to that pace. He's in a contract year, I believe.
Yeah, and you hate to see it in a contract year. If last season Pettersson had been the RFA, you could have seen him making near $10 million. He was worth that money. But, the slow start, it's going to be interesting to see. I know he scored the other night against Montreal, which is, sports fans just have to be happy that he got on the board. But, the slow start, it's going to be interesting to see how he rebounds from it because we're so used to seeing a hot start from Pettersson and not what we've seen so far.
Speaking on that series, that 3-game series against the Montreal Canadiens, Vancouver had too many turnovers, which Montreal capitalized. And really, if you've been watching Montreal throughout these 6-7 games right now, Montreal is dominating teams 5v5, and you just can't make turnovers against them on there. However, Vancouver's power play was really lights out, I thought, during the series. If you can get a slot shot or a slot opportunity against the Canadiens, you have a pretty good chance of burying that puck in the back of the net just because of how, open that opportunity is. And, I thought Vancouver did a really good job of exposing, that side of the Montreal Canadiens penalty kill.
Yeah, the Oilers last season, in terms of the power play, they needed to rely on that. But, now this season they're finding ways to score 5-on-5. I think the Canucks, could be that this season. They could be relying on either they're going to have a very good power play and be able to stay in these games, or they're going to have a very hard season, especially going against teams like the Montreal Canadiens, who were dominating them, like you said, 5-on-5. The Canucks are going to need these power play opportunities, because that's where players like Elias Pettersson, that's where players like Quinn Hughes shine, on the man advantage. When there's a little more room out there, they can really go to work. But 5-on-5, this Canucks team, they're definitely in a little bit of a pickle.
One player on the Canucks that I feel really bad for, as well as Elias Pettersson, is Thatcher Demko. He came into the bubble looking, lights out, really. We thought he was going to be the next starter. I'm pretty sure there were rumors until the Canucks picked up Braden Holtby. But, he was lightning in the bubble. It seemed like every team has a book on him now, though. And, we really see it as he's just not the Thatcher Demko that we had really thought to. He's just getting adjusted to facing teams more often, I think.
Yeah, no, Thatcher Demko in the playoffs last year was incredible. And I think, he really put the hockey world on notice. Deeper fans of the league knew how much of, a prospect he was for the Canucks. He played very well at Boston College. And he was an exciting, young rookie goaltender last season, coming in and playing that backup role to Jacob Markstrom. Throughout the regular season, he was solid. But like you said, it was in the bubble where he really began to shine. And, these rookie goalies, outside of Carter Hart, all of them, I feel like, take a bit of a step down in their second year, just because, teams have more of a page on them, with rookies, especially goaltenders. Rookie players, you're seeing them play night in, night out, but with a rookie goalie, they're only getting every, fifth start. So there's not much studying you can do on them. But Thatcher Demko, now that he's, been put out there more, he's being exposed.
And I think if that example isn't good enough, we can look to Jordan Binnington. He set the playoff record for wins, right, with 16. No one can ever beat it, or he tied it. I'm not sure. Anyway, he was a rookie that year. No one knew where his weaknesses were. So, now that people have gone to see him more often, we can say that, okay, maybe we should have our expectations a little lower than what we had them before.
Yeah, Binnington being my fantasy goalie, I don't want to talk down on him too much, but I think, it really was an advantage for that Blues team. I think goaltending was always the issue for them. They, throughout the 2010s, they always had great rosters, but their goaltending was never good enough. And with Binnington coming in, he just played incredible and was able to give them that Stanley Cup. And a little bit of regression, playing not as well as he did in his rookie season, but a little bit more down to level. I think he's still a solid starter. And I really hope the same can happen for Thatcher Demko. I hope he can develop more into like a decent starting role, especially, with the expansion draft for Seattle next season. I'm not sure if he'll be able to be exposed, but they're going to have to protect one of their goalies. And it's going to be a question of whether they want to win now and stick with Holtby, or, save it for the future and hope that Demko can be that starter.
Also, the Canucks have Michael DiPietro in the system. So you got three potentially good goalies, one guy who's a Stanley Cup champion, one guy who was lights out in the bubble. And, I guess DiPietro's, pretty unproven. But like you mentioned, what will the Canucks do? Because they're going to have, to answer some questions about their goaltending.
Yeah, I think, once we get deeper into the season, it's going to be interesting posing all these expansion draft questions. It's still early and raw, you don't really know what players teams are going to protect, but it's going to be an interesting storyline going down. And just to mention on Braden Holtby, I think 49 should not be worn by any goaltender in any sport. Braden Holtby rocking the number 49 just doesn't look good to the eyes. I just got used to watching 19 for Mikko Koskinen as an Oilers fan. And this curveball of 49 is just not very pleasant for me.
I would argue the same thing for Mikko Koskinen. I would say the exact same thing. I think players nowadays are choosing ego numbers. They're trying to create their own, number that fans will recognize it as, right? Like we all know 99 is attributed to Wayne Gretzky simply because that's retired by the whole league. But, 97, right? When you think of 97, you don't think of anyone else except, Connor McDavid. Okay, yeah, but
Yeah.
not
No,
in
I'm
that
joking.
sense.
I'm wearing a Connor McDavid T-shirt, and he's on my team. I agree with that fully. 97. You got McDavid. Although Kaprizov might be making a run for another 97 in this league.
I don't think he'll be on the same level as
Not the same
McDavid's.
level as McDavid, but and that's another thing. I'm not sure if Kaprizov wore that number growing up, but 97 was never like a too popular of a number. But you're going to see these players coming into the league. They grew up watching McDavid. I feel like 97 could become a more popular number.
I understand that, but now we're gonna someone's probably gonna wear number 62 because they want to create a name for themselves, and that's how they're gonna do it is by, oh yeah, okay, I'm gonna wear number 62 because no one's ever worn it before. I mean, look at TJ Brody, he's wearing number 78. Who in the hell is gonna wear number 78 on a regular team?
Yeah, no, I think numbers is definitely an interesting thing, but Braden Holtby's selection of 49, maybe I'll do a little more research and see what the meaning behind it is. But I got so used to seeing him wear number 70, it looked great on him, and I knew he was gonna have to change his number because Tanner Pearson wears number 70 in Vancouver, but I was not expecting the change to number 49. I can tell you that.
Let's talk about some rookies right here. The first name that we should mention is Ty Smith, who is off to a great start right now. He's on a 6-game point streak in the defenseman for the New Jersey Devils. He's playing third line minutes, and he's getting his power play time on PP2. So, that's how he's getting his ice time there. I think that, he's off to a great start, and he could probably make a good run for it at the Calder Memorial.
Yeah, with defensemen, there's not as much of an expectation to score points, but he's doing that. I believe you said he's leading the rookies in points, and as a defenseman, it's crazy. And if you were to end the season today, obviously it's early, but he'd be up there for Calder candidates. He's playing third pair, as you said, so I feel like people and analysts are going to need to see more of a complete game for him. But definitely, you couldn't have asked for much of a better start from Ty Smith.
Another rookie that has really not adjusted well to the NHL yet is Alexi Lafraniere. He's not visible whatsoever on the ice. If you watch the highlights or even watch any Rangers game, he's trying to make a physical presence or at least a presence on the ice. And, he's just off to a slow start. And I think that's just because he's adjusting to the NHL. And what people said last year about Hughes and Kakko could be really what we say about Lafreniere this year, in that we aren't seeing him be or live up to the number one overall hype that we're used to seeing, right? Hughes is finally making his mark this season, and I think that as the season goes along, Lafreniere will see more of him, hopefully, on the score sheet.
Yeah, I hope he starts to gain confidence and look good in the NHL. But one thing, I was on Instagram and there was a post about Lafreniere, and I was looking at the comments, and one guy said, maybe the Rangers should have let him go and play for Team Canada because he looked so great in the tournament last year when they won gold. I think maybe it would have been great for his confidence to go and get that, real game experience before he stepped into the NHL. But now, with this slow start, we're seeing a lack of confidence. And I don't know if that's, just personally with him. I believe he's a great talent. I saw it with my own eyes when he, was on that Team Canada team. I don't know if it's him or maybe it's the Rangers as a whole. Kaapo Kakko was also highly touted, and he looked great in his World Junior performance as well. And he came in and looked pretty invisible, and he's not doing too much in his second year either. So maybe it's, the Rangers are just, killing these rookies. And I think David Quinn, their head coach, he doesn't favor rookies too much. Kaapo Kakko got lost in the lineup last year, but Lafreniere, he's getting these opportunities. He's getting first line time. So it's going to be interesting, and hopefully sooner rather than later, he can start to hit his stride.
And he's playing with Zibanejad, who had a lights out season last year. And like you mentioned, we're just hoping that he hits his stride rather sooner than later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this Rangers team, they had a mediocre first half of the season, and then they really turned it on in the second half, due to Zibanejad and Panarin both having great seasons. So I feel like that team is super oriented around their top guys, and it is tough for these young players to, crack their way in. But, with Lafraniere. I think the talent's there. It's just, the chemistry and confidence has got to go up before we really see him make an impact.
One thing that I do want to bring up before we get to our predictions is the Pagcast Twitter account was just tagged in a tweet by Zach Hogan about an hour ago, and he released his power rankings for the North Division. He has the Canadiens at 1, Leafs at 2, Flames at 3, Jets at 4, Oilers at 5, Senators at 6, and Canucks at 7. I gotta say, as a Habs fan, I'm pretty sure anyone can agree that, with Montreal not losing a game in regulation yet, they are the team to beat. They are the team to beat. They're looking so confident, 5-on-5. They're capitalizing on the opponent's turnovers. They're capitalizing on the majority of their power plays. With the Leafs being at 2, I also agree with that. I think Montreal and Toronto could really be the teams to beat. In that North Division, we have the Flames at 3, which I think is fair to say. They're kind of getting a lack of offense, in my opinion. I didn't really see too much out of them, in the Flames and Leafs game yesterday on Sunday. The Jets are at 4. I think that's fair to say. I think we could see them drop a bit because of them not having Pierre-Luc Dubois, or maybe they can rise. Who knows? That's just how wild this division is. Number 5, we have the Oilers. And, I think that the Oilers at 5 can be interchangeable with the Jets and Flames. I can definitely see the Oilers squeezing into the playoffs there, maybe at the bottom of the spots. Senators and Canucks are also interchangeable. Senators at 6 and Canucks at 7. Nolan, I want to get your thoughts on his power rankings.
No, I agree with his power rankings to a certain extent. I believe, even though we're only a few games into the season, I think we've been given enough to really know what these teams are going to bring to the table night in and night out. And I think that there's 3 sort of tiers within this North Division. I think in the first tier, you have the Leafs and the Canadiens. I think it's a 2-team race, for that first spot. I think the Canadiens and the Leafs just look like the 2 best teams in the division thus far. And the Canadiens, they always had Carey Price through the last couple seasons, but since the Pacioretty, era of the team, they had, lack of depth on both offense and defense, and they've slowly addressed that within the last 2 seasons, and it's coming to fruition with this team playing very solid. Leafs as well in that first tier, and then I think the second tier is the Flames, Jets, and Oilers. I feel like anywhere he could have had those teams, I would have, not had much to argue with. And then I think the bottom tier of the North Division is the Canucks and the Senators this season. So not much to argue with there, but I do think that, it's those 3 tiers, and just within those, things could change.
Time for our predictions. We have a boatload of games on tap for January 26th. Last week, I went 3-4, 3 wins, 4 losses, unfortunately. So, let's just start off. I have Boston winning over Pittsburgh, Sabres winning over the Rangers, the Flyers winning over the Devils, the Capitals winning over the Islanders, the Panthers over the Blue Jackets, the Blackhawks surprising over the Predators, the Jets over the Oilers, the Wild over the Kings, the Stars over the Red Wings, the Golden Knights over the Blues, the Leafs over the Flames, Avalanche over Sharks, and Ducks over Coyotes.
All right, I'll get into my predictions. I'm not too sure. The reason I'm not saying my record last week is because, like you, I know I didn't do too great on the predictions. I'll just start it off with the Penguins Bruins. I'll take the Penguins in that game. I think they've been playing better than I expected them so far, and the Bruins still without Pasternak. They've been playing okay as well, but I think the Penguins will take that. I'll go with the Blue Jackets over the Panthers. Even though they're missing. Line, he's still to come in. I think they have a solid defensive system, and I feel like the Panthers, they rely on offense to win games. I'll go with the Devils over the Flyers. I think they're playing very solid, and the Flyers have been a little shaky. The Flyers in every game, they've either been amazing or terrible. I'll go with the Rangers, or I'll go with the Sabres over the Rangers. I'll go with the Wild over the Kings. I'll go with the Islanders over the Capitals. I think, Barry Trotz is going to know how to expose this team when they're missing those 4 players. It'll be interesting to see him against his former team. I'll go with the Predators over the Blackhawks. I'll go with the Oilers over the Jets. I think they won last night, and they'll capitalize on that. I'll go with the Stars over the Red Wings. I think that's the easiest pick. Maybe Stars have looked good. Red Wings have not. I'll go with the Flames over the Leafs. I think they split their 2-game set. I think the Flames, can play a better game than they did yesterday. Like you said, there wasn't much offense going for them. I'll go with the Coyotes over the Ducks, the Avalanche over the Sharks, and the Golden Knights over the Blues. So we'll see how I do next week, but I'm feeling good about these predictions.
Well, I'd like to thank again Nolan Thode for joining me on the second episode of Down to the Wire.
No, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me again.